Imagine a retired couple, and between them, they're receiving around $5,500 per month in Social Security. The mortgage is paid off, the bills are manageable, and life feels stable. Then, unexpectedly, one spouse passes away. And overnight, that $5,500 might become $3,000. Not because anybody made a mistake or not because something is wrong with Social Security. That's simply how the survivor benefit works. The bills don't change, the income does drastically. And here's the real surprising part that I found after sitting down with hundreds of families preparing for retirement. Most couples spend years planning for retirement, but never spend 30 minutes planning for the survivor. Yet, for almost every married couple, one spouse will eventually be alone. And that's where many retirement plans really get tested. Now, before you think this only affects a small number of people, let me ask you a question. When you picture retirement, who do you picture? Most people picture themselves and their spouse together, traveling, spending time with their family, enjoying the life they built. And that's how retirement is usually imagined. And that's how most retirement plans are built, around two people, two Social Security checks, two lives, two set of assumptions. But eventually, for almost every married couple, one spouse becomes the survivor. Now, that's not pessimism. That's a reality. And it's a reality many families are really never prepared for. And the blind spot is simple. Most couples focus on whether they can retire. Very few focus on what happens after the first death. What happens to income? What happens to taxes? And what happens to investments? What happens to spending? And what happens to the surviving spouse? And here's where many people get surprised. When one spouse passes away, Social Security doesn't continue paying both benefits. Generally speaking, the surviving spouse keeps the larger benefit and loses the smaller one. Two checks become one. And that can create a meaningful drop in household income overnight. Now let's go back to that couple for a minute. Their income just dropped from $5,500 to $3,000. Well, what happens next? The property taxes are still there. The insurance is still there. The utilities are still there. The maintenance is still there. In some cases, healthcare expenses actually increase. The income changed, but the expenses didn't. Can you see why this catches so many families by surprise? And honestly, the Social Security reduction is often only part of the challenge. I've sat down with surviving spouses who suddenly had to make decisions they never had to make before. Which accounts should I use? How much can I spend? Should my investments change? How will taxes change? What happens to required minimum distributions? The loss of income is just the first domino. That's why I believe it's one of the most important retirement planning questions a married couple can ask is, what happens if one of us is gone? Not eventually, not years later, immediately. What happens to income? What happens to lifestyle? What happens to confidence? Because if you've never looked at that scenario, you may have a blind spot in your retirement plan. When we help families prepare for retirement, we just don't plan for the couple. We plan for the survivor. We like to pressure test the income. We look at taxes. We evaluate investments. We ask what retirement would look like if only one spouse remained. Because retirement planning isn't just about helping you retire. It's about helping the surviving spouse continue living with confidence and dignity. Now let's go back with the couple we started with. One spouse passed away, income dropped from $5,500 to $3,000. And for many families, that isn't a possibility, it's a probability. The question isn't whether this risk exists. The question is whether you've planned for it. Because the best time to prepare for the surviving spouse isn't after the first death. The best time is while both spouses are still here to make these decisions together. Now, if you're married and you've never looked at what retirement would look like for your surviving spouse, that's exactly the type of conversation we have during a retirement review. We'll help you identify potential gaps and pressure test your income plan and understand how a survivor scenario could impact your retirement. The link is below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.